Here we are again. We're live with Dr. Kris on the Dr. Kris Live podcast. Dr. Kris, how are you?
Good, Steve. How are things up in your area?
I'm excellent. So today we've got a little topic here. When you think of fat, I'm going to turn this music off now. So when you think of fat, the only way I think of getting rid of fat is maybe burning it off or at least fasting to where your body is burning it off. But there are some ways that exist to remove fat, and they've got sculpting in that word. I guess folks in your universe, in the age management type thinking, have this, and one of them is called CoolSculpting. What are some of the others?
Well, there's CoolSculpting and WarmSculpting. So they're kind of the opposite of each other, which we'll go through. Of course, by the topic, you can probably figure out that we do WarmSculpting in the office. But we'll talk about, what it can be used for sure.
All right. So I'm going to roll the intro and then we'll kick off. If you're like most folks Dr. Kris Fusterhausen works with, you're active, you want to take ownership of your health, and you want to age gracefully. The problem is there is so much conflicting information out there about health and wellness, it's tough to know who to trust. Most providers are limited by what insurance will approve, so it can seem like they're only able to help you manage your health decline with more meds. On the Dr. Kris Live podcast, you'll learn how you can regain your confidence in your health journey. You'll learn helpful knowledge about programs, supplements, peptides, and hormones that Dr. Kris has used with thousands of patients just like you to help them crush their goals and be their best selves. So if you're ready to take charge of your health and are wanting to stay active and healthy so you can be a better parent, partner, or lover, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dr. Kris Podcast. All right. Welcome to this podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about some procedures or treatments that you're offer in shop there. And I guess folks come to you, and there are several ways to lose weight or lose fat. In this case, CoolSculpting and WarmSculpting.
Yeah. So I think the first thing I'd want to clarify with whichever procedure, if you decide to do one of these, is where is it really indicated at? And there's also another one called like M-sculpting. And so they're just different ways to go about these areas. These are, in my opinion, these are not for people who are dramatically overweight. That's going to stay back on our weight loss side of things with possibly GLP-1s and hormone replacement or balancing and those sorts of things. To me, CoolSculpting, WarmSculpting, even Neo-M-Sculpt, if you decided to go that way, are all procedures that are non-invasive procedures, but they're really indicated for somebody that has troublesome areas that they just, despite diet and exercise, they're not able to get under control. And that's most commonly going to be like, love handles, belly, bra bulge, sometimes above the knees in females, those type of areas. This is not, and unfortunately, sometimes this is what we get. We get consultations, and it's somebody who's truly overweight. And it's not that wouldn't help in that scenario. It's just not going to help enough. And you're better off using your resources at that point, with these other options. So really and truly, these are non-invasive procedures that we can go into that are really more for the person just despite everything. Their body scan looks good. They just have those troublesome areas. Like my body scan, I'm not overweight, but I still have these areas that are, troublesome. It's where I like to put fat. And these are modalities that can help that.
Yeah. So, I've got just a little bit of gut right there that you call it android fat right there in the front.
Yeah.
And, I do some intermittent fasting or I do some exercising, but I never can get back to that 6-pack. And I don't know if it's a real proper expectation for my age or whatever, but is that what we're talking about, is how to kind of reveal some hint of a 6-pack that might still exist?
Yeah, so let's kind of go through the differences between cool sculpting and warm sculpting. And again, uh, obviously, because of the way the topic is worded, we're warm sculpting fans, and I'll kind of go through that. But I'm not here to say that either procedure is horrible by any means. I just think that there are some side effects that can occur with cool sculpting that you don't get with warm sculpting. First of all, they're both FDA indicated for 16% permanent fat cell reduction per procedure. And so most people do 2 to 3 procedures, but it's not 16 times 3. You reduce 16, the next time 16 is a smaller number. So typically 2 treatments are going to kind of get us in that upper 20 percentile of permanent fat cell reduction for every 2 treatments. And those cells are gone forever, but you can put fat back. You can create new fat cells. So it's important that we combine these procedures with good diets and exercise. Otherwise, we are going to gain those fat cells back. So that's sometimes a misperception, like, well, the fat cell's gone forever, but yes, new cells can come back. So cool sculpting obviously uses cold. And so basically it's freezing fat cells, causing them to undergo lysis or rupture. And then we basically through through our urologic system, we end up urinating out those tiny little fat cells. Warm sculpting is obviously using heat. So it's using heat to rupture those fat cells. And basically same process. One's using heat, one's using cold. One's called cool sculpting. By the way, I always joke, this is not horribly painful procedures, but I always joke the adjectives are a little bit on the conservative side. It's cool sculpting, it's using cold, and warm sculpting is using heat. Okay, but they like to use these adjectives that don't sound so bad, warm and cool. And again, not to try to scare anybody, they're not horrible procedures, but they're also not procedures you do and say, I want to do it again tomorrow. The good news is they're typically 4 to 6 weeks apart, and you typically do them in sets of 3. Some of the things, though, the big things I always say about cool sculpting is that it is operator dependent. So it is as good to get those 16% reduction in fat cells that the FDA says that you can get. You have to have a very skilled operator. Whereas warm sculpting is operator independent. As long as you have an operator that knows how to hook up the pads, which any warm sculpting facility should know how to do that, you're going to get that on average 16% fat cell reduction. So cool sculpting uses cool, warm sculpting uses heat, operator dependent on cool sculpting, operator independent on warm sculpting. But the biggest differences that I've seen is that cool sculpting can actually cause hypopigmentation of your skin. So in other words, you can actually and I've seen this in my practice where I've had a couple cool sculpting patients that the pads they put on them were permanently hypopigmented. So it looked like forever that you had tanned with a pad on your belly. But also there can be neuropathy that occurs with cool sculpting, especially if it's being done by someone that maybe is not as skilled as others. And so neuropathy, of course, is nerve damage, and that can be very painful. And so with warm sculpting, they actually do not see any neuropathy or hypopigmentation associated with it. So in summary, I always just tell patients they have the same exact FDA indication. Why have you heard of CoolSculpting more? Well, CoolSculpting is actually owned by Allergan, which Allergan is what owns Botox. And many years ago, they put a ton of money behind the marketing of CoolSculpting. They hired Kim Kardashian to promote it. They may still have it, a NASCAR. They had a golfer. They really went deep into promoting it. Warm Sculpting is owned by SculpSure, which is a pure laser company, and they certainly marketed it, but unfortunately, I would say they never marketed it to the point that CoolSculpting did, and so I just don't think it has the brand name. It's pretty rare that you don't mention to, especially a female, CoolSculpting, that they don't at least have an idea of what it is. When we investigated, we came very close to buying CoolSculpting, and that's when a patient walked in with this hypopigmented pad site on her. It scared me enough that I backed away from that and then found WarmSculpting. So very similar technologies. They can work very well when used properly. And I would say that's maybe the biggest thing is patient selection is very important. If you're not coming to us, make sure you're going to somewhere that's giving you a good evaluation to make sure you're a proper candidate for it. Otherwise, you may not notice enough difference to be worth it to you.
So is it like a belt or a vest or something that has these metal?
Yeah, so warm sculpting is literally like it's basically like a belt. It's got pads that basically contact the skin, and warm sculpting is a 2010 cycle. So basically, they've obviously know what they're doing with this technology, and that is that for the 20 seconds it applies heat. And literally right at the moment where you think it's starting to get too hot, like if something's hot on your skin, like about where you say stop, it then boom, it goes over to 10 seconds of cold. And it actually is very cold. Like immediately once the cold kicks over, all discomfort goes away. And then that lasts 10 seconds and then 20 seconds again. And our technicians try to take the heat up as much as possible. They subjectively watch you during the procedure, and if Steve's like not even grimacing, like it's no big deal, then they'll slowly ramp it up without you even knowing it. Like most people don't even know that the person in the room is actually turning up the heat, because you do get used to it after a few minutes. And so they turn up the heat like that very, very slowly, because the hotter that it does get, the more cells that it does lyse. And sometimes that's the difference. Like one person may get better results than another person. And we believe that when you look back, usually it's like, how much could they tolerate? Redheads, and I say that lovingly because I was a redhead for the first 5 years of my life, we're usually a little more sensitive to temperature. So like my wife makes fun of me. She goes up to the hottest temperature and says, I don't know what you're talking about. This thing is like painless. For me, I'm over there like hopping around, like it's really painful, which it really, I've gotten pretty used to it now. We find that women typically tolerate it better than guys the first procedure. I think that's literally because girls are a little tougher than us with pain. But again, I never want to promote it as like painless, but I also don't promote it as painful. It's just one of those things you kind of got to get used to it. And people tolerate temperature different than they tolerate like real pain. Like I've always said, like there are people that, you can put something hot on their arm and it's just like, oh my God, or versus another person like, what is that? It doesn't even bother me. So yeah, it's a pads. They basically strap to you. And then the device has 4 packs that we call it. And you can actually, it's basically, I always say, I call it the Predator machine because it's got these 4 big cords and 4 packs that you can do up to once. So like, let's say I was going to do my belly and my flank. I would actually, in each rotation is 20 minutes. Okay. So there's a couple minute warm up and then it's 20-10 for like 18 minutes. And then it's over. But if I was going to do my actual belly and my flank, I would actually have to do 2 rounds, because 4 packs would be needed for my belly and 4 packs would be needed for my flank. So that would end up being a 40-minute procedure. Oh, by the way, I didn't cover this. Typically, CoolSculpting is 40 plus minutes. So many times if somebody's just doing their abdomen, it's only 20 minutes. So if you are a person that thinks like this kind of sucks, warm sculpting typically is going to be less time of suck if you see it that way. So a little quicker procedure. But yeah, it's just belts. It's just these belts that we put on you. Those are perfectly painless. They hook the things up that cause the heat, the packs. And then they take them off and, you come back in about 4 to 6 weeks and do it again. I always try to tell people to count on 3 procedures, but if you're happy after 2, by the way, you won't see results it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. So it's not something you do and you're like, wow, I got abs today. That does not work that way. It takes a little time. Oh, I also forgot chin. That's another, submental is another area we can do it. So this can be one of the most difficult areas to treat on a person. You can see a lot of really thin people that still have kind of a bigger jowl area. There is another procedure called Kybella, which is an injectable. We've done Kybella for a long time. It burns like the Dickens. I think I'd rather have a lot of things than Kybella. And I'm not a wuss, but man, that really hurts. I'd much rather do warm sculpting to that area than Kybella, just because of the pain that occurs with it.
So if I was to do it after 2 treatments, I'm going to receive like a 16% reduction in my
No,
gut.
you'll be closer to 30. So it's 16 per procedure. So, like I always say, it's like Colts. You know how they do like 40% off and then an extra 20%? And that's not 60%, right? It's actually like 55%. But people, I always say math is hard and people fall for numbers, right? So it's 16 per procedure. But if you reduce it 16%, it ends up being about more like 13% the second time. So we say high 20s. So you're going to get in the high 20 percentile. And not to make fun of these people, but if you come in and you're morbidly obese and I remove 29%, there's still way too much. So it's not an effective way to necessarily lose weight. It is a way to get rid of that troublesome fat in those areas that sometimes, like I said, despite good diet, good exercise, we just can't get those little pockets of fat gone. So that's where we really like to use it. It's really for the person that has overall a good body scan. Maybe they're on a GLP-1. Okay, they've come to us. They've been on GLP-1s, even though their body scan looks amazing. If it's a girl, maybe they're at 20% body fat. The visceral fat's 5%, and they're like, "But dang it, still got this bra bulge that I don't like." Like, well, cool. That's exactly what this is indicated for. So it's just, I try to say that up front because we get probably 1 out of 2 consults that aren't appropriate for it. But of course, then we just turn around and talk about GLP-1s or whatever we think is appropriate for them at that point.
So is SculpSure the brand name for WarmSculpting?
Yeah, when it came out, it was called SculpSure, and it's still called SculpSure. And then CoolSculpting, had that CoolSculpting name, and I think that they very quickly thought that WarmSculpting sounded more pleasant and appealing. So I still call it SculpSure. I always have to remember that they've now taglined it WarmSculpting. And so, yeah, SculpSure and WarmSculpting is tomato. We're saying the same thing there.
So what do you combine this treatment with? All right, you said GLP-1s, but are there other things that you would take into consideration?
Yeah, so body composition is something that's ever evolving, and every person is a little bit different. And so, whenever I talk about warm sculpting, I think we're mainly talking about body composition changes, metabolic changes, and where I kind of wanted to take the last part of this discussion is maybe some simple things that people can do that they don't even have to see me if they don't want to. Heck, they can go to our online store and get the things that I'm about to talk about. Now, prescription wise, there is a great, I love the blockade of, well, actually, let's back up and talk about NAD. And so NAD is kind of like the precursor energy in our body, and NAD decreases with age, just like hormones decrease with age. And NAD is really important because NAD is what activates sirtuin genes in our body, or SIRT genes. So unfortunately, as we get older, we start to lose NAD, so we have less of a pool of NAD. That's why, NAD infusions have gotten very, very popular around the nation. You go into any drip bar and they're going to try to probably talk you into an NAD infusion. And I'm here not to be the bad guy. Well, I guess I am going to be the bad guy. I would tell you not to do it. I think it's a waste of time because most likely they're not doing an effective NAD infusion. An effective NAD infusion takes multiple hours to do, and you will not feel good while you're getting it. Like I've heard people say, "Oh yeah, I've gotten those before." I go, "Cool. How long did it take?" "Oh, like 20 minutes. How'd you feel?" "Great." I'm like, "You didn't get an NAD infusion. You got a drop of NAD in a bag that they could call it an NAD infusion, but NAD infusions actually aren't fun." There's only a couple studies out there, and neither one of them actually showed that when you do NAD IV, it actually gets where it needs to be, which is intracellularly. So say that again, intracellularly. And so just because it's in your bloodstream doesn't mean it gets into your cells, and the studies are very non-conclusive. So I think the best way to go about NAD is to go about the things that I'm about to say. First of all, get a good night's sleep. Believe it or not, NAD levels are better in people who get a good night's sleep. If you're going to exercise in the morning. Believe it or not, people who exercise in the morning have better NAD levels than people who exercise in the evening. And last thing is what we always like to say is fasting. Believe it or not, fasting helps with NAD levels. So if you fast, if you sleep good, which I don't so much. I'm working on. And you exercise in the morning. Those are some natural ways to improve NAD. Of course, there's other things, and that's where we're going to go now. We do have a prescription peptide that you would have to be seen for and cleared for. And it's really not a peptide, although we lump it in with peptides. If we're being exact, it's not a peptide, but it's called 5-amino-1-MQ. And 5-amino-1-Q is a prescription NMT inhibitor. So in our body, we have a salvage pathway, which is where we recycle NAD. It does its job. We recycle it. We add back the side chains needed to turn it back into NAD. So it circulates, okay, NAD plus. And that pathway, we have a couple of pathways that kind of steal it. And one of it is called the NMT pathway. And so 5-amino is a NMT inhibitor. So it's very good. And if people feel great on 5-amino because it does raise our intrinsic NAD levels, especially if you're NMT dominant. But it is prescription. It is a little bit costly. Maybe sometimes it's a little above the budget for some patients. There is a nutraceutical, so a supplement called 1-MNA, 1-methylnicotinamide, and it's on our website or in-house, and it is also an NMT inhibitor, but it's been classified as a nutraceutical, which means you don't have to be seen to get it. You can actually just go onto our website and get it, and it's 1 capsule a day. And it is a very potent NMT inhibitor as well. And so that is one of those things that by blocking the theft of NAD, we can actually bring up those intrinsic NAD levels. Another one, of course, that we've talked about many times on this podcast is Lucinergy. Lucinergy is a great... there's 1-MNA right there. We really, really like, that's cheap. Just by the website, we're giving
ordering now. Look at that.
Man, we're giving it away, it appears. Lucinergy is low-dose leucine in combination with resveratrol and B6, and it does a very good job of making our lower NAD levels work as if we have higher NAD levels. So we really, really like Lucinergy. It should be somewhere there on the website from New BioAge. LEU. There you go. Hey, it's got a price. And so Lucinergy is 2 in the morning and 2 after lunch in the afternoon. And what it basically is doing is it's actually helping activate sirtuin genes just by a different process than 1-MNA or 5-amino. Of course, 5-amino is not on the website. That's prescription. And then the last one is called apigenin, and apigenin works through CD38 blockage. And that's that second way that our body AP, and that is the third or the second way that our body steals basically the NAD from our body. So a perfect combination, in my opinion, if a person could afford it, who's really trying to work on their body composition, is apigenin with 1-MNA, because you're blocking those 2 salvage pathways, theft of the salvage pathways through 2 totally different mechanisms. And then Lucinergy, which is making the amount of NAD in our body work better. So if it budgetary wise fits for a person, I think that is the absolute best way that they can actually, in a combination with fasting, good night's sleep, and exercise in the morning, to raise our NAD levels. Better than this NAD nasal spray, better than NAD infusions, which you hear a lot about. So at our office, I get asked a lot, do you do NAD infusions? I say no. No, because I don't need you to be here 4 hours. You're going to feel like crap, and I'm not even sure that it works. We have stuff that we know that works, and you can do it every day, so you get that effect every day. So I just want to kind of cover a little bit about NAD and how it works on body composition.
Yeah, that's excellent. Again, when folks that are considering this needs to go along with the mindset of a lifestyle change. This is not, like you said, you can get the WarmSculpting and it'll remove fat cells, but they'll come back if you're not changing your lifestyle. And, the folks that work with you that excel, they come in with that mindset. They're taking ownership in their journey, and they're complementing your insight. They have to do some work as well.
Yeah, we're usually looking at most patients as a 1 year project. Like where can we be in 1 year? Of course, that's where does the patient want to go to? Some patients just want to lose a little. Some patients want to lose 8 to 10 pounds, and they're happy, and that's fine, as long as their scans look good. I always tell patients they'll come in and say I'm ready to stop the program and move to maintenance, and I'll say we're not ready yet because your scan doesn't. We have not gotten to that healthy part yet. Just because you feel better in your dress or your dress pants doesn't mean we're healthy. And so I really do push my patients, and it's something patients need to be. Now, if I can't force them to stay on the program, so if they want to make that choice, that's their choice. And I'm not doing it for compensation reasons. I'm doing it because I want them to be healthy. Because I know that maintenance is actually pretty easy. It's just getting a person to where they need to be. I was having this conversation with one of my providers this morning. Is that unfortunately sometimes patients really underestimate how much weight they have to lose, and I hear that a lot. Like, I only need to lose 15 pounds. I'm like, more like 30. And they're like, oh no, there's no way I could lose 30 pounds. I hear this a lot. I would look too frail. I'm like, no, you really would. And I promise you, if you lost 30 pounds of fat, you're going to look a lot of things, but frail ain't going to be it. Because I think a lot of people, when they lose a lot of weight, they lose a lot of muscle with it, and they will look frail in that circumstance. So if they've been through kind of an improper weight loss, it's one of my pet peeves about some of these different weight loss programs that are popular, is that they're losing a lot of muscle mass. And that's where you do. Let's take the bariatric surgery really quickly, like stomach bypass or sleeve surgery. A lot of times you will see those patients down the road and they've lost a lot of weight, but like, golly, they look not so great sometimes. The good news is I don't think there's a reason why most patients have to go that way anymore, unless you truly are a habitual overeater. The sleeve procedure and these things are really dramatic ways that I don't think we need to go through, unless you probably are truly like morbid obese or super obesity. But we've all seen that person, right, where they lose 100 pounds. You're like, whoa, like they don't look so good. And that's because they lost a lot of muscle in that process. They do the proper nutrition as far as counseling with these patients. A lot of them quit eating. They're like, well, I can't eat, so I just don't eat very much. And they don't get the protein in. And like I said, I will take you off the program if you start losing too much muscle. It's just not what we do here. We're all into muscle here. We're not into losing it.
One thing that really made an impact on me was this guy showed someone that ran these marathons and what they look like, and then someone that runs sprints.
Yeah.
They look so much more robust. And this is the mindset that you should actually look more sprinty than marathon-y.
Yeah, absolutely. I use that analogy a lot with somebody. I'm like, especially when I get runners in my practice, and I will acknowledge, if you just truly love running, then that's your thing, and I'm not going to try to break you of it. But most people don't run because they want to. They think somehow it's making them healthier. And I'm like, why do you run so much? Oh, because that's how you get healthier. Like, well, you're not healthy. So like, that's not working, right? And I always go, do you want to look like a marathon runner, or do you want to look like a sprinter? And I've yet to have anybody ever say a marathon runner, because marathon runners, they don't look necessarily unhealthy, but they don't look healthy. They look like just the average Joe, because they're built for long distance. They're not built for speed. Whereas we know that like HIIT workouts, muscular wise, are much better. Like, do you want to look like Usain Bolt? I can't even name you a famous marathon runner. So I would just say, do you want to look like Usain Bolt, or do you want to look like some generic marathon runner? I always think of like those Ethiopian guys, they're always like really, really like emaciated looking, but they can run forever. And I'm like, that's awesome if that's your goal, but for longevity, that's not good. And so you're going to literally run your muscle off, and you're going to have you're going to be kind of skinny fat. Most marathon runners are probably is a little bit more on the side of skinny fat. Their weight's fine, but their muscle mass is low and their body fat's high. And I think that'll be a good topic for us down the road, as we'll start getting more into prescribing exercise and how we can do that here.
Cool. So if someone wants to work with you, they want to take ownership of their journey, they understand they have responsibilities, they need to change their lifestyle. What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so the researchclinic.com, that's going to go on there. There's a button for consultation that's going to take you actually now directly to Brenna. And she works all day long on responding to people very promptly. You're also on there. You'll find our phone number, which is 817-599-9902. If you want to call us, you can. Third option is if you're local, and we like this option, just stop in and talk to us. Sometimes stopping in, and if you are local, that can be a very good way of just understanding what we do.
All right. Well, good conversation. Learned some stuff today, and we're going to roll out the outro. Anything else before we kick it out?
No, man. I got a half a day between me and Cabo, so just headed off to Cabo soon. So, but I am, just so all my customers know, I'm going to be meeting some of the most brilliant minds out there in Cabo. So we're going to have fun, but we're also going to talk a little business too.
A little shop. All right. Thanks for joining the Dr. Kris Podcast. If you learned something today and you want to connect and get more information, visit our website, www.drkris.life, where you can find more great information or even schedule a time to learn how you can engage with Dr. Kris. Be sure to follow, like, share, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dr. Kris Podcast.